There is a quiet reason you were guided here instead of somewhere else. Out of countless voices competing for your attention, this moment found you because something gentle has been unfolding beyond what your eyes could notice. Don't skip, not because you might miss a dramatic ending, but because every sentence carries another piece of a picture that has been forming long before today. The answer you have searched for has never been hiding from you. It has simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Last night, while the world slowly settled into silence, the person you love found themselves in an unexpected conversation. Across from them sat a girl whose presence seemed ordinary at first. There was laughter, familiar stories, and long pauses that only appear when people begin speaking honestly. Nothing about the evening suggested that your name would suddenly become the center of everything. Yet sometimes the smallest question changes the direction of an entire conversation without anyone realizing it until much later. For a while, they spoke about everyday things, allowing the hours to pass unnoticed. Then the atmosphere shifted in a way no one planned. A thoughtful silence arrived, the kind that gently encourages hidden thoughts to surface. The girl looked at the person you love with quiet curiosity, as though she had been holding back a question for far longer than anyone knew. When she finally spoke, her voice carried no judgment, only genuine wonder. She asked about you. The room seemed to slow for a heartbeat. Not because the question was unexpected, but because it reached a place inside them they rarely allow anyone to see. There are moments when a single name unlocks emotions carefully tucked away beneath routines, distractions, and unanswered feelings. Your name became that key. Instead of answering immediately, they smiled in a way few people understand. It wasn't the smile of someone pretending. It wasn't the smile of someone avoiding the truth. It was the quiet expression of a heart remembering something meaningful before finding the courage to put it into words. Even the girl noticed that the silence spoke before the answer ever could. Something important is waiting for you, because what happened next wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle. Sometimes the deepest truths arrive wrapped inside ordinary conversations, where no one expects lives to quietly change. The person you love looked away for just a moment, almost as if searching through memories instead of searching for the right sentence. In that brief pause, countless moments crossed their mind. Small conversations. Shared smiles. Missed opportunities. Words they wished they had spoken differently. Tiny details most people forget became impossible for them to ignore. They realized that some people never truly leave your thoughts, even when days pass without a single message. Some connections remain present in silence, growing quietly instead of disappearing. The girl watched carefully. She had expected a simple answer, perhaps only a name followed by a casual explanation. Instead, she witnessed someone wrestling with feelings too genuine to summarize in a few words. She could tell that whatever existed between you and the person she was speaking with carried a weight that could not be measured by appearances alone. Then they finally inhaled, as though gathering every honest emotion into one response. Their eyes softened. Their voice became calm. And the words that began to leave their heart carried far more meaning than anyone sitting there had anticipated. Those first few sentences caused the girl to slowly lower her gaze, not because she was disappointed, but because she suddenly understood something she hadn't seen before. Stay till the end, because the meaning behind those words is still unfolding. What they said next didn't simply answer her question, it quietly reshaped the entire conversation, revealing something neither of them expected to discover. And that revelation begins with a single sentence that will change everything in the next part. A quiet realization has a way of arriving without asking permission. It doesn't burst through the door or demand to be noticed. It simply settles into the room until everyone present understands that nothing will feel quite the same afterward. That was exactly what happened as the person you love finally allowed their heart to speak more honestly than it had in a very long time. Their first words were not dramatic. They were calm, almost whispered, yet they carried a sincerity that could not be mistaken. Some people leave an impression that never really fades, they said, their eyes drifting somewhere beyond the room, somewhere only memories could reach. The girl listened carefully, sensing that she was no longer hearing an ordinary conversation. She was hearing someone describe a connection that had quietly shaped their inner world. For a moment, neither of them spoke again. Silence has its own language. Sometimes it says more than 100 carefully chosen sentences. In that stillness, the girl noticed something she hadn't expected. Every time your name was mentioned, the expression on their face softened, not with regret, not with sadness, but with a quiet warmth that appeared naturally, as though your memory carried its own light. She leaned forward ever so slightly before asking another question. What is it about them? It sounded simple. Yet the person you love didn't answer immediately. Because some questions deserve more than quick replies. They looked down at their hands for a brief moment, almost smiling to themselves. It wasn't because they were searching for impressive words. It was because they were realizing that the truth had become impossible to hide, not from someone else, and not from themselves. Don't skip. This next part of their answer revealed something even they hadn't fully admitted before. I've met many people, they said softly. Some stayed for a season. Some disappeared without warning. But there are very few whose presence continues to shape the way you think, even when they're not standing beside you. The girl remained completely still. She expected them to change the subject. They didn't. Instead, they continued speaking with a calm honesty that surprised even them. They have this way of making ordinary moments feel meaningful. Sometimes I remember the smallest things, a conversation, a smile, even a silence we once shared. Strange, isn't it? Those are the memories that refuse to disappear. The girl's expression slowly changed. Until that moment, she had imagined your story was only a passing chapter in their life. Now she began to understand that it had become something much deeper. She wasn't witnessing someone speaking about the past. She was watching someone discover that certain feelings had quietly remained alive all along. Something important is waiting for you. Because the next question she asked wasn't about where you were. It wasn't about whether you still spoke. It wasn't even about what had happened between you. Instead, she looked directly into their eyes and asked the one question they had secretly been asking themselves for far longer than anyone realized. If they stood in front of you today, what would you say? The room fell silent once again. This time, even the person you love couldn't hide the emotion behind their gentle smile. Their answer came slowly. And before the final sentence left their lips, the girl's eyes widened in complete surprise, because she suddenly understood a truth that had been hidden in plain sight the entire evening. What they said next would become the moment neither of them would ever forget. Lights shimmered in the distance, each one appearing steady, yet every one of them carried its own unseen story. In that quiet view, they found the courage they had been searching for. Then, with a gentle breath, they finally spoke. "I don't think I'd begin by explaining anything." The girl blinked. She had expected a long speech, perhaps an apology or a careful account of everything that had happened between you. Instead, they offered something far simpler. "I think I'd just be grateful for the chance to stand there." Those words settled into the room with surprising weight. The girl searched their face, trying to understand why such a simple sentence felt so powerful. She realized that gratitude often reveals what pride tries to hide. It was no longer about finding perfect words. It was about recognizing the value of someone's presence. Stay till the end. Because what came next revealed something even they hadn't realized until that very moment. They smiled softly, almost laughing at themselves. "You know what's strange?" they asked. The girl quietly shook her head. "I've imagined that moment more than once." The admission surprised even them. Not because imagining someone is unusual, but because they had never spoken it aloud before. Thoughts that had lived only in silence were now becoming real through honest words. "I've imagined meeting them again without rehearsing anything. No perfect conversation. No carefully prepared explanation. Just a chance to be genuine." The girl listened without interrupting. She noticed that every sentence seemed lighter than the one before, as though speaking honestly was quietly lifting something from their heart. Then she asked another question. "What would you hope they noticed first?" A gentle smile appeared. "That I'm listening." She looked puzzled. They continued. "So much time is spent trying to be understood that we forget how meaningful it is to truly understand someone else. If I ever stood in front of them again, I'd want them to feel heard before they ever felt questioned." For several long moments, neither of them spoke. The silence no longer felt uncertain. It felt peaceful. Almost complete. Then the girl lowered her voice. "I don't think you're describing someone you've forgotten." The person you love looked down with a quiet smile that carried both humility and hope. "No," they admitted. "I don't think I ever truly did. Something important is waiting for you." The conversation had already become more meaningful than either of them expected, but the evening still held one final surprise. The girl slowly reached into her bag and pulled out something small that had remained hidden the entire night. She placed it gently on the table without saying a single word. The person you love looked at it. Their expression changed instantly. Because what rested in front of them carried an unexpected connection to you, one they never imagined would appear in that moment. And as they reached toward it, they quietly whispered a sentence that caused the girl to stop breathing for just a heartbeat. The meaning behind those words would unfold in the next part. Not every turning point announces itself with noise. Some arrive with nothing more than the gentle placement of a small object on a table, unnoticed by the world yet unforgettable to the hearts that witness it. As the person you love looked down, time seemed to move differently, slower, quieter, as though even the evening wanted to hear what would happen next. It was something simple. Not expensive. Not extraordinary to anyone passing by. But to them, it carried a memory they had never expected to meet again. Their fingertips paused just above it before finally lifting it with remarkable care, almost as though they were holding a forgotten chapter of their own story. The girl watched closely. I found this a while ago, she said softly. I didn't know whether it meant anything. The person you love smiled with a mixture of surprise and quiet affection. It means more than you probably realize. Those words weren't spoken out of sentiment alone. They came from a place that had remained untouched for a long time. In an instant, memories returned, not as overwhelming waves, but as gentle echoes. Conversations that once seemed ordinary suddenly felt precious. Tiny moments that had slipped past unnoticed now carried unexpected significance. Don't skip. Because this was the moment the evening stopped being about memories alone. It became about understanding. The girl tilted her head with genuine curiosity. I've never seen you react like this before. For a brief second, they searched for the right explanation. Then they laughed softly. That's because very few people remind you of who you were when your heart was completely honest. The sentence lingered in the air. Neither of them hurried to fill the silence. Sometimes the most meaningful truths deserve room to breathe. They continued, their voice calm and steady. People often think it's the big moments they remember forever. But it isn't. It's the little things, the conversations that lasted 5 minutes longer than expected, the kindness no one else noticed, the feeling of being understood without having to explain yourself. The girl slowly nodded. Now she understood. This wasn't about holding on to the past. It was about recognizing the lasting impact of someone who had quietly changed the way another person saw the world. Something important is waiting for you. She looked at them thoughtfully before asking one final question. So, if they never knew any of this? The person you love gently lowered their gaze. Would you ever tell them? The room became completely still. Outside, the night carried on as though nothing unusual had happened. Inside, everything had changed. After a long pause, they answered with a peaceful certainty that hadn't been there at the beginning of the evening. I think the right words always find their moment. The girl smiled. So you're still hoping? They didn't answer immediately. Instead, they looked at the small object in their hand one last time before quietly saying, I've learned that hope doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it simply stays, patiently, waiting for the right door to open. The girl sat back, deeply thoughtful. For the first time that night, she wasn't trying to understand the person you love. She was trying to understand you. Because after hearing everything they had shared, one quiet realization settled into her heart. She finally understood why your name had never truly left their thoughts. But what she chose to say next, about the person you love, about you, and about the connection she had just witnessed, would become the most unexpected part of the entire night. A quiet smile can reveal more than 100 confident speeches. As the silence gently settled around them once again, the girl looked at the person you love with completely different eyes. The assumptions she had carried into the evening had quietly disappeared, replaced by a growing respect for something she hadn't expected to witness. She folded her hands together for a moment before speaking. I think I misunderstood you. The person you love looked up, surprised. I thought your silence meant you had moved on. A faint smile appeared across their face. Sometimes silence doesn't mean the story is over, they replied. Sometimes it means the heart is still learning what truly matters. Those words hung in the air with remarkable peace. There was no attempt to impress. No desire to prove anything. Only honesty. Don't skip. Because the next realization didn't belong only to the girl. It belonged to the person you love as well. She leaned forward and asked gently. When you talk about them, you never describe what they have. You always describe how they made you feel. Have you noticed that? The question caught them completely off guard. For several seconds, they couldn't answer. Not because they disagreed, but because they had never noticed it themselves. Their eyes lowered again as they quietly replayed every sentence they had spoken that evening. She was right. Not once had they mentioned appearances. Not once had they spoken about success, status, or achievements. Instead, every memory returned to moments of peace. Moments of laughter. Moments when life somehow felt lighter simply because you were part of it. A gentle laugh escaped them. I suppose you're right. The girl smiled. That's usually how you recognize someone who truly mattered. The room felt warmer now. The conversation no longer carried uncertainty. It carried understanding. Something important is waiting for you. The person you love slowly leaned back in their chair and looked toward the quiet night outside. You know, they said softly, I kept thinking time would erase certain feelings. They paused. But it didn't. It changed them. The girl listened carefully. They became calmer, wiser, less about wanting answers and more about appreciating what was real. She nodded without interrupting. For the first time all evening, neither of them felt the need to solve anything. Some truths don't arrive to create urgency. They arrive to create clarity. Then the girl asked one final question before the night could end. If you had one chance to leave them a message, and you knew they would read every word, what would you want them to understand? The person you love closed their eyes for just a brief moment. Not to escape the question, but to answer it honestly. When they opened their eyes again, there was a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. I'd want them to know. They stopped. A gentle smile crossed their face. That some people become part of your life without realizing how deeply they've shaped it. The girl's expression softened. She understood. Completely. Yet just as the evening seemed ready to come to a peaceful close, something unexpected happened. A gentle sound interrupted the silence. The person you love glanced toward their phone resting on the table. The screen had just lit up. One new notification. They looked at it, then froze for a moment. The girl's eyes followed their expression. What is it? She whispered. The person you love didn't answer immediately. Instead, they smiled in quiet disbelief. Because the name glowing on that screen was the very last one they ever expected to see at that exact moment. And what happened after that single notification would make the entire conversation feel as though it had been leading to this moment all along. The smallest moments often arrive without announcing that they will be remembered forever. The gentle glow of the phone rested on the table, illuminating the room with a quiet light that seemed far brighter than it should have been. Neither of them reached for it immediately. Sometimes anticipation carries more meaning than the answer itself. The girl noticed the expression on the person you love's face change in the gentlest way. Not surprise alone. Not excitement alone. Recognition. The kind that appears when something familiar returns at exactly the moment your heart has become ready to receive it. They picked up the phone slowly, almost afraid that moving too quickly might disturb the fragile beauty of the moment. Their eyes remained fixed on the screen for several long seconds before a peaceful smile quietly appeared. The girl couldn't help but ask, "Is everything all right?" They nodded. More than nodded. Their entire presence seemed lighter somehow. "It's interesting," they said softly. "Sometimes life has a way of reminding you that certain connections never disappear completely." The notification itself wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with extraordinary words. It was simple. Yet simplicity has a remarkable way of reaching places that complicated explanations never can. Don't skip. Because what truly mattered wasn't the message itself. It was what it awakened. The person you love sat back, allowing a quiet breath to escape. "I spent so much time wondering whether certain moments still mattered," they admitted. "Now I realize they were shaping me even when I couldn't see it." The girl smiled gently. "Maybe that's what meaningful connections do." They looked at her thoughtfully. "They don't ask for attention every day. They simply remain, patiently, until you're able to understand their value." The room grew still again. Outside, the night continued exactly as before. Inside, something had become unmistakably clear. The person you love wasn't holding on to an illusion. They were holding on to gratitude. Gratitude for every conversation that had taught them something. Every shared laugh that still echoed in quiet moments. Every memory that reminded them kindness leaves a lasting mark. "Something important is waiting for you." The girl lowered her voice. "I think I know why tonight happened." They looked at her with quiet curiosity. She smiled. "Not so you could remember the past." She paused. "But so you could finally understand what it has been trying to teach you." Those words settled deeply. For the first time all evening, the person you love stopped searching for hidden meanings. Instead, they simply appreciated the truth standing gently in front of them. After another peaceful silence, they whispered, "If I ever have the chance to speak openly again, I won't waste it by trying to sound perfect." The girl nodded. "What will you do instead?" A warm smile appeared. "I'll be honest. No rehearsed speeches. No impossible promises. Just honesty. Because the strongest words are often the quietest ones." The evening was nearly over. The chairs were pushed back. The conversation had reached a place neither of them expected when they first sat down. Yet as they prepared to leave, the girl suddenly remembered something she hadn't mentioned all night. "Oh." She turned back with an expression of genuine surprise. "There's one thing I almost forgot." The person you love stopped in their tracks. "What is it?" She smiled knowingly. "Before I met you tonight, someone said something about the person you love." The room became completely still once more. Not because anyone felt afraid, but because the next sentence carried the final missing piece of a story that had quietly unfolded all evening. And when those words were finally spoken, they would change the way the person you love understood everything that had happened that night. There are moments that arrive so gently they almost pass unnoticed, yet they become the very moments we remember long after everything else has faded. The person you love stood still, waiting with quiet patience. The girl's expression wasn't mysterious anymore. It was thoughtful, as though she had been carrying one final piece of the evening with her, unsure of exactly when it should be shared. She smiled softly before speaking. "I wasn't going to mention this." The person you love tilted their head slightly. "But now I think I should." For a heartbeat, the room seemed to fall completely silent again. Not with tension, but with expectation. The kind that appears when truth is finally ready to be spoken without fear of being misunderstood. She continued. "Earlier yesterday, before I even saw you, someone happened to mention the person you care about." The person you love listened without interrupting. "I didn't think much of it at the time," she admitted. "It felt like an ordinary conversation." She paused and smiled to herself. "But after everything you've shared tonight, those words suddenly make perfect sense. Don't skip. Because this wasn't about discovering a secret. It was about recognizing something that had quietly been true all along." The person you love asked gently. "What did they say?" The girl looked at them with complete sincerity. "They said that some people leave a lasting impression simply by being themselves. They don't have to chase attention. They don't have to prove their worth. Their kindness stays with people long after the conversation ends." The person you love didn't speak. Their eyes lowered for a moment. Not because they were overwhelmed, but because those words echoed everything they had been trying to express all evening. The girl noticed the quiet smile returning. "I think that's why your answer changed everything," she said. "It wasn't because you spoke beautifully." They looked toward the window one last time. "Now I realize they always did." The night no longer felt unfinished. It felt complete. Not because every question had been answered, but because the most meaningful one had. What truly remains in someone's heart? Not perfect memories. Not flawless conversations. But genuine care, quiet respect, and the courage to remember the good without pretending everything was easy. The girl smiled as they prepared to leave. "I hope one day they understand how much they meant." The person you love answered with peaceful confidence. "Whether they ever hear these words or not, they've already changed me." They stepped outside into the calm night air. The sky looked exactly the same as it had only hours before. Yet everything inside them felt different. Sometimes the greatest change isn't found in the world around you. It's found in the quiet clarity that settles within your own heart. And somewhere beyond what either of them could see, a new chapter was already beginning. One built not on unanswered questions, but on the quiet hope that sincere hearts have a remarkable way of finding the moments they were always meant to share.